I am Alexa, 29 years old, and until recently married to Cooper for 4 years. My mother-in-law, Zafira, never thought I was good enough for her precious son. Tonight at Meridian, an upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle, Zafira presented me with divorce papers as my 30th birthday gift. Everyone watched as Cooper recorded my reaction on his phone, their smiles anticipating my breakdown. Instead, I signed immediately, thanked her, and walked out with my head held high. They had no idea what I had already set in motion. If you're watching this and have ever dealt with toxic in-laws who tried to control your marriage, drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables in ways they never saw coming. I grew up in a loving, middle-class home in suburban Portland. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger brother. Dad was a high school English teacher, and Mom managed a small accounting firm. They taught us the value of education, hard work, and honesty. Unlike some of my friends who had their college fully paid for by their parents, I worked part-time jobs throughout my undergraduate years while maintaining a scholarship. After graduating with a business degree, I landed an entry-level position at a respected marketing firm in Seattle. That's where my career took off. Within 3 years, I had earned 2 promotions through dedication and creative campaign strategies. My life felt on track professionally, but my personal life consisted mainly of brief relationships that fizzled out due to my demanding work schedule, until Cooper. We met at my college roommate Madison's wedding. Cooper was the best man, cousin to the groom. He caught my eye immediately with his confident smile and piercing blue eyes. During a reception, he approached me at the bar and struck up a conversation. The chemistry was instant and electric. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and goals. "A beautiful woman with brains and ambition," he had said, raising his glass to toast me. "That's a winning combination." Cooper came from old money. His family owned Sterling Industries, a tech manufacturing company started by his grandfather that had expanded significantly under his father, Henrik's, leadership. Cooper worked as the vice president of operations, a position that afforded him a luxurious lifestyle. He had an MBA from Stanford and the polish of someone who grew up with privilege, but without the arrogance I often associated with wealth. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend getaways to wine country, surprise deliveries of flowers to my office, and long conversations about our dreams for the future. Within 8 months, he proposed during a private dinner cruise on Puget Sound. I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found my life partner. The first warning sign appeared when I met his mother, Zafira Sterling. She was impeccably dressed in designer clothes, her silver hair styled perfectly, not a strand out of place. Her smile never reached her eyes as she looked me up and down. "So you work in advertising, is it?" she asked, making my career sound like a hobby. "Marketing, actually. I'm a senior account manager for Pacific Strategies." "How interesting," she replied with a tight smile. "I always told Cooper he should marry someone who could focus on creating a proper home. Careers can be so demanding for a young wife." Cooper squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing to contradict his mother. I ignored the knot forming in my stomach, telling myself she just needed time to get to know me better. Wedding planning became a battlefield. Zafira had opinions about everything, from the venue to the flower arrangements. When I selected a sleek, modern dress, she brought me magazine clippings of traditional ball gowns more suitable for a Sterling bride. When I suggested incorporating some of my family's Irish traditions into the ceremony, she dismissed them as charming but unnecessary. Cooper played peacekeeper, often siding with his mother to keep the peace, while promising me privately that things would improve after the wedding. His father, Henrik, remained largely silent, deferring to Zafira in all social matters while he focused on business. "My mother means well," Cooper would say after particularly tense planning sessions. "She just wants everything to be perfect. Once we're married, she'll step back, I promise." Despite the tensions, I held on to hope. I loved Cooper and believed in our future together. The wedding was beautiful, if overly extravagant for my taste. Zafira got her way on most details, but I focused on what mattered. Cooper and I were starting our life together. The first 2 years of marriage had their ups and downs. We purchased a beautiful townhouse in Capitol Hill, which I worked hard to turn into our home. Cooper traveled frequently for business, but when he was home, we enjoyed exploring Seattle's restaurant scene, attending concerts, and hosting small dinner parties for friends. Zafira visited often, usually unannounced. She would inspect our home, running her finger along surfaces, checking for dust, rearranging my carefully selected decorative items, and making subtle comments about my housekeeping or cooking. Cooper grew up with professionally prepared meals, she would remind me. He's used to a certain standard. I made countless efforts to win her approval. I researched and prepared elaborate meals when she visited. I joined the charity committee she chaired at the Seattle Arts Foundation. I even took cooking classes, hoping to eliminate any reason for criticism. Cooper promised repeatedly to establish boundaries with his mother. "I'll talk to her," he would say after each incident, but the conversation never seemed to happen. Or if it did, nothing changed. Still, I remained hopeful. I believed that with time and consistent effort, Zafira would accept me as part of the family. I thought that once we had children, things would naturally improve. I imagined Zafira as a doting grandmother, her coldness melting in the presence of her grandchildren. I was wrong. Very wrong. The real turning point came when Cooper received a significant promotion 3 years into our marriage. As the new Chief Operations Officer for Sterling Industries, his responsibilities expanded to include international partnerships, requiring him to travel even more frequently. Sometimes he would be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, leaving me alone in our large home. Or rather, not alone. Zafira took these absences as an invitation to increase her presence in our lives. She began stopping by unannounced several times a week, often letting herself in with the key Cooper had given her for emergencies. I would return from work to find her in our kitchen, inspecting the contents of our refrigerator or reorganizing our pantry. "Alexa, darling," she said one evening when I came home to find her arranging flowers in our living room, "I noticed your throw pillows were looking rather worn, so I took the liberty of ordering new ones. The teal you chose simply didn't complement the wall color." The new pillows, in a shade of beige I found boring, had already replaced mine. My carefully selected teal pillows were nowhere to be seen. "What happened to my pillows?" I asked. Zafira waved dismissively. "I donated them to Goodwill. They really weren't up to standard." These intrusions extended beyond decor. Zafira began commenting on my appearance, suggesting my wardrobe was too career-focused and not feminine enough. She questioned why I continued working such long hours when Cooper can more than provide for both of you. The implication being that my career was unnecessary and perhaps even selfish. The worst incidents involved food. Zafira had opinions about everything I cooked, finding fault with even my most successful dishes. When I prepared salmon Wellington for a dinner with Cooper's colleagues, spending hours to get it perfect, Zafira took one bite and said, "It's a bit overcooked, dear, and the pastry is soggy. Perhaps you should have practiced first." As the evening progressed, she regaled the table with stories of Cooper's childhood, pointedly mentioning how his previous girlfriend, Runa, had been such an accomplished chef. "She studied in France, you know," Zafira added, looking directly at me. Later that night, I confronted Cooper about his mother's behavior. "You humiliated me in front of your colleagues," I said, fighting back tears. "And why does she still have a key to our house? We need boundaries, Cooper." He sighed, loosening his tie. "You're overreacting again, Alexa. Mother was just trying to help with dinner. She has high standards, that's all. And of course she has a key. She's family." "But what she said about Runa—" "That was just conversation," he interrupted. "You're being too sensitive. Mother loves you in her own way." This pattern repeated itself with increasing frequency. When I redecorated the guest room, Zafira redesigned it during one of Cooper's trips. When I mentioned we were considering starting a family, Zafira questioned whether I was mature enough for motherhood and suggested we wait until Cooper's career stabilized further, which made no sense given his success. The isolation grew when Zafira began hosting family dinners where Cooper was always invited, but the invitation to me would come as an afterthought or not at all. At one holiday gathering, I overheard Zafira talking to her sister Raisa. "Of course, she's not what we had hoped for Cooper, but he seems attached for now. I'm sure he'll come to his senses eventually. The prenuptial agreement will protect the family assets, thank goodness."
I had known about the prenuptial agreement, of course. I had signed it willingly, not wanting Cooper's money. But hearing Safira discuss it so coldly made me realize she had never seen our marriage as permanent. Things worsened when I discovered Safira had been reviewing our financial records. Cooper and I maintained joint accounts, and one day, while using his laptop, I found spreadsheets detailing our spending, with certain items highlighted, primarily purchases I had made, even reasonable ones like a new winter coat or business attire for work. When I confronted Cooper, his response chilled me. Mother's just helping me keep track of our finances. She's always been good with money management. But these are our private finances, Cooper. Our marriage. She has no right. Don't be dramatic, Alexa. She's looking out for our best interests. In that moment, I realized the extent of the problem. Cooper would never prioritize our marriage over his mother's influence. The boundaries I had hoped for would never materialize. The man I thought would be my partner was, in reality, still very much his mother's son. That night, alone in bed, while Cooper slept in the guest room claiming he needed space from my negativity, I felt the first real crack in my heart. The hope I had been nurturing that things would improve began to wither. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake tying myself to a family that would never truly accept me. But even then, I wasn't ready to give up. I still loved Cooper. I still believed we could work through our problems if only he would see how his mother's behavior was affecting our marriage. I didn't yet understand that the problem went much deeper than Safira's interference. I didn't yet see that Cooper himself was the true disappointment. The situation deteriorated further when I discovered Safira had been systematically poisoning my reputation among our social circle. At a charity gala, I overheard Diana, who I had considered a friend, telling another woman that she had heard I was emotionally unstable and struggling with the demands of being a sterling. The source of this information was unmistakably Safira. Confronting Diana directly led to an uncomfortable confession. Zafira had been hosting ladies' lunches where she would express concerns about my mental health and suggest that friends keep a watchful eye on me. She had effectively isolated me from the social connections I had been building since moving to Seattle. Meanwhile, Cooper began spending more time with his family without me. Sunday brunches, golf outings, and even weekend trips to their lake house in the San Juan Islands became regular occurrences. When I asked to join, there was always a reason why it would be better if I stayed home. It's just business talk, Alexa, you'd be bored. Or, mother's in one of her moods, let me handle her alone this time. Our fourth anniversary should have been a celebration. I had planned a surprise weekend in San Francisco with tickets to a show Cooper had mentioned wanting to see. 2 days before we were set to leave, Cooper canceled. Mother's having some sort of crisis with the foundation gala, he explained, not meeting my eyes. She needs my help with the major donors. We'll celebrate when I get back, I promise. I spent our anniversary alone, watching the show by myself with an empty seat beside me that I had paid hundreds of dollars for. Cooper sent flowers to my hotel room with the card that read, "Sorry, we'll make it up to you." The card was signed in Safira's handwriting. He hadn't even bothered to arrange the gesture himself. When he returned, there was no mention of making up for the missed anniversary. Instead, he brought up a new concern. "Mother thinks you might benefit from speaking with someone," he said carefully over dinner. "A therapist? She knows someone very discreet who specializes in adjustment issues." "Adjustment issues?" I repeated, putting down my fork. "You know, adapting to the sterling lifestyle. Mother thinks you seem unhappy." The suggestion that I needed therapy because I wasn't adapting properly to Safira's constant interference was the final insult. "The only thing making me unhappy is your mother's constant meddling and your refusal to stand up to her," I said quietly. Later that week, I came home early from work with a migraine to find Cooper and Zafira in our living room speaking in hushed tones. I paused in the hallway, out of sight. "She's becoming more difficult," Zafira was saying. "I worry about her stability, Cooper. Remember how she snapped at the cleaning lady last month?" I had never snapped at our cleaning lady.
In fact, I had given her a bonus after she worked late to help prepare for a dinner party. "I know, Mother," Cooper replied. "I'm keeping an eye on the situation. The prenup is solid if it comes to that." "It might have to," Zafira said. "I never wanted to say this, but I've always felt she married you for the sterling name and fortune. Her background is just so ordinary." That night, I went through our financial documents and discovered something disturbing. Cooper had been gradually restricting my access to our joint funds. Large transfers had been made to accounts in his name only. When I checked our investment portfolio, I found that my name had been removed as a beneficiary on several accounts. My career had been thriving despite the personal turmoil. I had been promoted to account director, overseeing campaigns for major West Coast brands. My salary had increased significantly, something that seemed to make both Cooper and Zafira uncomfortable. "Do you really need to work such long hours now?" Cooper asked after my promotion. "We have more than enough money." "I work because I love my job. My career is important to me." Zafira was more direct during one of her uninvited visits. "A wife's ambition can be so unattractive to a husband. Men need to feel like providers. Your success might be emasculating poor Cooper." I later discovered that Zafira had been planting seeds of doubt about my intentions. "She's advancing so quickly," she told Cooper. "Perhaps she's using the sterling name to climb the corporate ladder. Or worse, perhaps she's preparing for independence, building her own wealth in case of divorce." The irony was that I had never once considered divorce until I found the text messages. Cooper had left his phone on the counter while showering, and a notification popped up from someone named Runa H., the same Runa who had studied cooking in France. Against my better judgment, I looked. The messages were intimate and ongoing, referring to their special weekends and how Runa couldn't wait to see him again. There were mentions of a future together once Cooper handled his situation at home. When confronted, Cooper denied everything at first, then shifted to anger. "You invaded my privacy," he shouted. "This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior Mother has been concerned about." By morning, he had packed a bag and moved to his parents' house, claiming he needed space to think about our future. He left me alone in our home, surrounded by the life we had built that now felt like an elaborate facade. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I struggled to concentrate at work. I lost weight as my appetite disappeared. Friends tried to reach out, but I had withdrawn, ashamed and confused about how my life had unraveled so completely. In my darkest moments, I wondered if Zafira had been right all along. Perhaps I wasn't good enough for the Sterling family. Perhaps I was the problem. It would take a devastating public humiliation for me to finally see the truth. After 3 weeks of separation, Cooper returned home with roses and apologies. He claimed the messages with Runa were nothing serious and that he had ended whatever was happening between them. "I miss you," he said, his eyes conveying what seemed like genuine remorse. "We can fix this, Alexa. I know we can." I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, I still loved the man I thought he was, or could be. I agreed to try again, setting clear expectations about boundaries with his mother and transparency moving forward. For a few weeks, things seemed better. Cooper was attentive and present. Zafira's visits decreased. We attended 2 counseling sessions, though the therapist seemed strangely focused on my acceptance of family dynamics rather than addressing the actual issues in our marriage. Then came the devastating discovery that shattered any remaining illusion. I went to withdraw money for a gift for my brother's graduation and found our joint checking account nearly empty. When I checked our savings account, it too had been drained, with only $50 remaining. Our investment accounts showed massive withdrawals. Panicked, I called Cooper, who was traveling for business. His response was cold and prepared, as if he had been expecting my call. "I've moved our assets temporarily," he said without emotion. "Mother suggested it would be prudent given your emotional state. We'll discuss restructuring our finances when I return."
You emptied our accounts without telling me. That's financial abuse, Cooper." "Don't be dramatic," he replied. "The money is safe. Mother and I are just protecting what's rightfully ours until you demonstrate more stability." The word ours hung in the air. Not ours, meaning Cooper and me, but Cooper and Zafira. In that moment, I finally understood that I had never been a true partner in my marriage. I had always been an outsider, tolerated, but never accepted. That night, I contacted a lawyer friend for a recommendation and secretly met with Oscara Turner, one of the top divorce attorneys in Seattle. She listened to my story with growing concern. "What you're describing is financial abuse and gaslighting," she said bluntly. "Unfortunately, it's quite common in wealthy families trying to protect their assets from what they perceive as outsiders." She advised me to gather whatever documentation I could without alerting Cooper or his family, and to prepare for a difficult battle. "The Sterlings have resources and connections," she warned. "They won't make this easy." Over the next few weeks, I discovered that Cooper had been monitoring my emails and tracking my location through my phone. Hidden cameras had been installed in our home office and bedroom, disguised as digital clocks. When I found them, I left them in place, now aware that I was being watched. I began planning my exit strategy carefully. Secretly, I opened a new email account on a library computer. I purchased a prepaid phone. I copied whatever financial records I could access and stored them in a secure cloud account. I reached out to Aaron Mitchell, a private investigator recommended by a colleague whose brother worked in financial crimes. Aaron told me during our first meeting in a coffee shop, far from my usual haunts. "Rich families often think they're untouchable. They get sloppy, assuming their money and connections will protect them." Aaron's investigation revealed disturbing patterns. The Sterling Foundation was being used to funnel money through fake charitable projects. Taxes were being evaded on a massive scale. Corporate funds were being diverted to personal accounts, and Cooper was deeply involved, his signature appearing on numerous questionable documents. But the investigation uncovered something else unexpected. Evidence of Cooper's infidelities, not just with Runa, but with 3 other women over the past 2 years. Aaron provided photographs, hotel receipts, and credit card statements showing gifts purchased for these women using company accounts disguised as business expenses. "Your husband has been quite busy," Aaron observed dryly as he showed me the evidence, "and quite careless." I felt oddly calm reviewing the proof of Cooper's betrayal. Perhaps I had already emotionally detached from the marriage more than I realized. Or perhaps the financial crimes seemed so much more serious that the affairs paled in comparison. With Aaron's evidence in hand, I sought out Oscara Turner again. She reviewed the documents with growing interest. "This changes everything," she said, tapping the folder containing evidence of tax fraud. "Leverage, exactly what we need." Oscara explained that while the prenuptial agreement was indeed solid, evidence of criminal activity created new possibilities. "The courts take a dim view of assets acquired through illegal means," she noted. "And the IRS is always interested in tax evasion, especially on this scale." Under Oscara's guidance, I began meticulously documenting everything. I created secure digital backups of all evidence. I recorded conversations when legal to do so. I kept a detailed journal of incidents of emotional abuse and financial control. I also began securing my financial independence. My boss, Haley, had been concerned about my declining performance at work and the visible stress I was under. When I finally confided in her about my situation, she became an unexpected ally. "My first husband pulled similar stunts," she revealed. I won't let another woman go through what I did without support. Haley arranged for my year-end bonus to be deferred and paid into a new account at a different bank. She connected me with her personal financial advisor, who helped me establish credit in my name alone. She even offered me a temporary place to stay when the time came to leave. I built a support network outside of the social circle the Sterlings controlled. I reconnected with old college friends. I joined a support group for women in difficult marriages, using only my first name. I started therapy with a counselor of my own choosing, one not connected to the Sterlings in any way. Each step was taken with extreme caution. I maintained the appearance of trying to save my marriage. I continued to attend Sterling family functions, smiling through Zafira's barbed comments. I performed the role of dutiful wife while secretly preparing for my exit.
By the time Cooper and Zafira orchestrated their public divorce paper delivery, I had already filed confidential reports with the IRS whistleblower office regarding the tax fraud, secured copies of all relevant financial documents showing Cooper's involvement, established financial independence with new accounts, credit cards, and a small apartment rented under a friend's name, built a case for a more equitable divorce settlement despite the prenuptial agreement, documented the pattern of emotional abuse and financial control. What the Sterlings failed to understand was that I had never wanted their money. I had wanted a genuine partnership with Cooper, a relationship based on love and respect. When that proved impossible, I sought only what was fair, and the accountability they had evaded for so long. The plan for my 30th birthday revenge had been months in the making. I knew Cooper would suggest celebrating at Meridian. It was where he proposed, and Zafira loved the restaurant's prestige. I also suspected they would orchestrate something humiliating, given the pattern of their behavior. What I didn't expect was for them to be quite so bold as to present divorce papers as a birthday gift in such a public venue. But their arrogance played perfectly into my hands. The morning of my birthday, I had already moved most of my personal belongings to the apartment I'd secretly rented. I wore a dress I had purchased specifically for the occasion, elegant, confident, and expensive enough that no one could question my taste or status. I arrived at Meridian knowing this would be the last time I would have to perform the role of Cooper's wife or Zafira's daughter-in-law. The freedom of that knowledge made me calmer than I had been in years. Cooper seemed nervous throughout dinner, checking his phone frequently and exchanging glances with his mother. Henrik looked uncomfortable in his expensive suit, clearly aware something was planned but wanting no part in it. Kayal and Sydney watched with barely concealed anticipation, like spectators at a gladiator match. When the waiter brought out the small cake with a single candle, I knew the moment had arrived. Before we continue the celebration, Zafira announced, her voice carrying across the restaurant, we have a special gift for Alexa. Heads turned at nearby tables as she withdrew the thick envelope from her designer handbag. From all of us, she said with that cold smile I knew so well. We thought it was time. I opened the envelope slowly, already knowing what I would find. The divorce papers were brutal. No alimony, no claim to any Sterling assets, and a gag order preventing me from discussing the family publicly. Cooper held his phone up, recording my reaction. Kayal and Sydney leaned forward expectantly. Several patrons at nearby tables were openly staring, anticipating tears, a scene, something to gossip about later. Instead, I took a pen from my purse, signed the papers with a steady hand, and slid them back to Zafira. Thank you for making this easy, I said calmly. I've wanted out of this toxic family for longer than you know. I stood, placed my napkin on the table, and added, Cooper, I hope Runa enjoys being the next project for your mother to control.
Zafira, you've succeeded in destroying our marriage. Congratulations, the victory is yours. With that, I walked out of Meridian with my head held high, feeling the stares of the other diners burning into my back. It was only when I reached the safety of a taxi that I allowed myself to smile. They had no idea what I had already set in motion, no idea at all. But they were about to find out. The morning after the restaurant incident, I moved the remainder of my belongings into the apartment I had secretly prepared. I changed my phone number, keeping the old one active only to monitor the increasingly frantic messages from Cooper. They evolved from anger, "How dare you embarrass us publicly," to threats, "You'll get nothing," to false concern, "We're worried about your mental state," to eventual pleading, "Please call me, we need to talk." I instructed Ascara to handle all communication with Cooper's lawyers. Meanwhile, the mechanisms I had set in motion began to work. 3 days after I signed the divorce papers, the IRS launched an official investigation into Sterling Industries and the Sterling Foundation based on the evidence I had provided. Federal agents arrived at Sterling Industries headquarters with subpoenas for financial records. Company executives were questioned, accounts were frozen pending investigation. The family's banking activities came under intense scrutiny. Cooper's first inkling that something was seriously wrong was when he tried to access the company's main operating account and found it temporarily restricted by federal order. A week after the restaurant humiliation, Zafira called my old number, leaving a voicemail that veered between fury and panic. "Whatever you think you're doing needs to stop immediately," she hissed. "You signed the divorce agreement. You have no right to cause trouble for this family. If you continue, we will destroy you." I saved the voicemail as further evidence of intimidation. Through Ascara, I arranged a meeting with the entire Sterling family and their legal team at their attorney's downtown office. I arrived with Ascara, Aaron, and a forensic accountant who had reviewed all the evidence. The Sterlings expected to intimidate me into dropping whatever claims I might make. Instead, they walked into a carefully laid trap that would change everything.
Before we begin discussing divorce terms, Ascara opened the meeting, my client would like to address some concerns about potentially criminal financial activities she has discovered. The color drained from Henrik Sterling's face as our forensic accountant methodically presented evidence of tax fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement spanning 7 years. Cooper repeatedly tried to interrupt, but his own lawyers silenced him with a firm hand on his arm. "The IRS investigation is already underway," Ascara continued calmly. "The SEC has also been notified about certain securities violations. However, my client is primarily concerned with achieving a fair divorce settlement, not criminal prosecution." "This is blackmail," Zafira spat, her carefully maintained composure cracking for the first time. "This is negotiation," Ascara corrected. "Mrs. Sterling wishes to modify the terms of the prenuptial agreement in light of these extraordinary circumstances." What followed was 6 hours of tense negotiation. The Sterling's lawyers conferred privately with the family multiple times. Voices were raised, threats were made, but ultimately, faced with the mountain of evidence and the reality of the ongoing federal investigation, they conceded to our terms. First, a fair division of marital assets acquired during our 4-year marriage, regardless of whose name they were in. Second, ownership of the intellectual property I had helped develop for Sterling Industries' marketing campaigns. Third, a non-disclosure agreement that worked both ways, preventing the Sterlings from disparaging me, just as I would not speak publicly about their legal troubles. Fourth, a substantial settlement reflecting my contributions to Cooper's career and the growth of Sterling Industries during our marriage. By evening, new papers were drawn up and signed. The Sterlings left ashen-faced and silent. Only Cooper lingered, asking to speak with me alone. Against Ascara's advice, I agreed to 5 minutes. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Is it revenge? Money?" It's accountability, Cooper, something your family has avoided for too long. I never wanted your money. I wanted a husband who respected me, who chose me over his mother's manipulation. You couldn't be that man. I loved you, he insisted weakly. No, you loved the idea of me, the attractive, accomplished wife who looked good at corporate events but would ultimately bow to the sterling way of doing things. When I failed to become that person, you chose your family's toxic dynamic over our marriage. He had no response to that. As he turned to leave, I added, "Give Rona my congratulations. I hope she enjoys cooking for your mother's approval." The legal process moved forward, but my revenge wasn't yet complete. The timing was almost poetic. Zafira's 60th birthday was approaching, an event she had been planning for months. A lavish celebration at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel's ballroom with 200 of Seattle's elite in attendance. Business partners, social connections, charity board members, all the people the Sterlings needed to maintain their facade of respectability. Through a former colleague now working for the event planning company handling the party, I learned every detail of the celebration. I knew the guest list, the schedule, the seating arrangement. I knew Zafira had ordered a custom gown from Milan. I knew Henrik would be unveiling a diamond bracelet worth 6 figures as her gift. The night of the party, I arrived at the Fairmont dressed elegantly but discreetly. I hadn't been removed from the guest list, either through oversights or because the Sterlings feared drawing attention to my absence. I timed my entrance for maximum effect, walking in during Zafira's self-congratulatory speech about the Sterling legacy and commitment to community service. She faltered mid-sentence when she saw me, her champagne flute freezing halfway to her lips. Henrik followed her gaze and nearly dropped his own drink. Cooper, standing near his parents, went pale. I moved through the crowd, greeting people I knew with warm smiles. Many seemed confused by the palpable tension, looking between me and the Sterling family with curiosity. I approached Harold Bannett, the chairman of Pacific Northwest Bank and a key Sterling Industries investor, who had always been kind to me. "Harold, how lovely to see you," I said, embracing him warmly. "I've been meaning to call you. There are some financial matters regarding Sterling Industries I thought you should be aware of before the story breaks in the Business Journal next week." Similar conversations with 5 other key business associates followed. I was careful never to make specific allegations publicly, only to suggest they might want to distance themselves from certain Sterling ventures given what's coming to light. The beauty of the approach was its subtlety. I violated no confidentiality agreements while still managing to create significant concern among the Sterling's most important connections. As whispers spread through the party, I noticed several guests discreetly checking their phones, perhaps Googling Sterling Industries and finding the first small news items about an ongoing federal investigation into financial irregularities. The crescendo came when I approached Runa, who was indeed Cooper's date for the evening. She looked uncomfortable in a dress too young for her, clearly trying to meet Zafira's expectations. "Runa, we've never been properly introduced," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Alexa, Cooper's wife. Well, soon-to-be ex-wife. Has he mentioned he's still legally married, or that he's been seeing 3 other women besides you? The federal investigation has uncovered some interesting credit card charges at hotels across the country." Runa's expression shifted from confusion to shock to anger in seconds. She looked at Cooper, who was hurrying toward us, then back at me. Without a word, she turned and walked directly to the elevator, ignoring Cooper's calls to wait. By this point, Zafira had abandoned her speech and was attempting to salvage the evening, moving frantically between important guests with fixed smiles and urgent whispers. Henrik had disappeared completely, perhaps making emergency calls to lawyers.
I made my way to the center of the room where the elaborate birthday cake waited to be presented. I tapped a spoon against the champagne flute, gaining everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast to Zafira Sterling," I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "A woman who taught me the true meaning of family loyalty, who showed me exactly what kind of marriage I didn't want, who gifted me divorce papers on my birthday in a public restaurant with her son recording my humiliation for their entertainment." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Zafira stood frozen, her face contorted with rage and mortification. I signed those papers immediately and walked out proudly, because I had already discovered the truth about the Sterling family, about their business practices, about Cooper's multiple affairs, about the web of deception they had woven for years. I raised my glass higher. "So thank you, Zafira, for freeing me from your toxic family. The federal investigators send their regards. Happy birthday." With that, I placed my untouched champagne on a nearby table and walked calmly to the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted. Guests began making excuses to leave. Zafira collapsed into a chair, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Cooper stood abandoned in the center of the room, his girlfriend gone, his family's reputation in tatters.
Within days, the full story broke in the Seattle Times business section. Sterling Industries stock plummeted. Several board members resigned. The charity foundation was placed under external administration. Former friends and associates publicly distanced themselves from the family. Cooper attempted to contact me several times, alternating between rage and pleas for reconciliation. "We could start over," his final message suggested. "Leave Seattle, go somewhere new." "I choose you now, Alexa. I choose you over them." Too little, too late. I deleted his message without replying. 6 months after the birthday party incident, my life had transformed completely. The divorce was finalized with terms favorable to me, providing enough capital to start my own boutique marketing consultancy specializing in ethical business practices. The irony wasn't lost on me. My first clients came through connections who had witnessed the Sterling family's fall and been impressed by my grace throughout the scandal. Haley, my former boss, joined me as a partner, bringing her expertise in client relationships to our new venture. I moved to a comfortable but modest condo in Fremont, far from the gilded cage of our Capitol Hill townhouse. The space was entirely mine, decorated according to my taste, without fear of criticism or interference. No one had keys except me. No one entered without my explicit invitation. Therapy became a crucial part of my healing journey. Dr. Martinez helped me understand the patterns of emotional abuse I had endured and the subtle ways my confidence and independence had been undermined over years. She helped me recognize that standing up for myself wasn't revenge, but restoration of my dignity. Healing isn't linear, she reminded me during a particularly difficult session when memories of happier times with Cooper surfaced unexpectedly. You can miss aspects of your marriage while still knowing you made the right decision to leave. New friendships blossomed with people who valued me for myself, not my connection to a wealthy family. I reconnected with college friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. I joined a hiking group and discovered a love for outdoor adventures I had never explored before. I even began dating again, cautiously but optimistically. The Sterling family's legal troubles continued to unfold. Henrik faced criminal charges for tax evasion and securities fraud. Cooper avoided prosecution by cooperating with authorities, but was removed from his position at the company. Zafira withdrew from social life entirely after several former friends publicly discussed her manipulative behavior. Cooper attempted reconciliation multiple times. Flowers delivered to my office, emails expressing regret and promises of change, even an awkward visit to my condo building where he stood in the lobby until I agreed to come down for 5 minutes. "I miss you,"
he said, looking genuinely distressed. I was wrong about everything. Mother was wrong. We should have supported your career, your independence. I see that now. Would you see it if your family hadn't faced legal consequences? Would you be here if their reputation was still intact? He had no answer to that. In his silence, I found my closure. Goodbye, Cooper, I said gently. I hope you find happiness, but it won't be with me. 3 weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved to Portland to work for a college friend's startup, a fresh start away from the shadow of the Sterling name in Seattle. I wished him well in my heart, the anger finally beginning to fade. The most unexpected encounter came 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I was shopping at the Pike Place Market when I literally bumped into Zafira Sterling. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She looked older, tired, wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her silver hair showing dark roots. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. I expected anger, accusations, threats. Instead, I saw something I had never witnessed in her before: uncertainty. She said, "Alexa," finally, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. "Zafira," I replied calmly. She seemed to struggle with what to say next. "You look well." She thanked you. "I am." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Around us, people browsed fresh produce and artisan crafts, oblivious to the charged moment. "You destroyed our family," she said finally, but the words held more despair than venom. I shook my head. "No, Zafira. Your family was destroying itself long before I came along. The dishonesty, the manipulation, the belief that rules didn't apply to you. I simply refused to be another casualty." She flinched slightly at my words. "Henrik may go to prison." "I'm sorry about that," I said, and found that I genuinely meant it. But those were his choices, not mine. Zafira looked down at her half-empty basket. "Cooper is gone. He barely speaks to me now." "Perhaps that's for the best, for both of you." She looked up sharply. "You never loved him, did you? It was all about the money, the status." Even now, she couldn't see the truth. I loved Cooper deeply, enough to believe me could overcome your interference, enough to stay far longer than I should have. It was never about money, Zafira. It was about respect, partnership, and honesty, things your family never understood. Without waiting for her response, I nodded goodbye and moved away, continuing my shopping. I felt her eyes on my back, but didn't turn around. That chapter of my life was closed. The journey taught me lessons I carry with me every day. I learned that love without respect isn't really love at all. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but necessary. I learned that financial independence isn't just about money, but about the freedom to make choices. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. I forgave Cooper and the Sterling family, not for their benefit, but for my own peace. Forgiveness meant releasing the anger and bitterness that could have poisoned my future. A year after the divorce, I received an unexpected phone call from KL, Cooper's brother. His voice was hesitant, uncertain. "Alexa, I know this is awkward, but I wanted to apologize," he began. "Sydney and I were wrong to go along with everything that happened. We knew it was cruel, but we were afraid of standing up to Mother." I appreciated his honesty, even if it came too late. "I understand family pressure, KL, but your silence was complicity." "I know," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, watching what happened to you and Cooper has changed how Sydney and I handle Mother's interference in our marriage. We've set boundaries we should have established years ago." It was something, I supposed. Perhaps some good had come from my pain. My business continued to grow. Integrity Marketing Solutions became known for helping companies rebuild their reputations after ethical failures. We specialized in authentic communication strategies that focused on accountability rather than cover-ups. Companies that had faced scandals sought us out, knowing we understood both the damage that deception could cause and the power of genuine transparency. One of our most successful campaigns involved helping a tech company recover after a data breach. Instead of minimizing the incident, we helped them take full responsibility, implement robust security measures, and communicate honestly with affected customers. Their stock price initially dropped, but recovered stronger than before as consumers rewarded their transparency. "You have a gift for this," Haley observed during one of our weekly planning meetings. "It's like you understand both sides, the temptation to hide the truth and the liberation that comes from telling it." She was right. My experience with the Sterlings had given me unique insight into how wealthy families and corporations often prioritized image over integrity. It had also shown me the power that came from refusing to participate in their games. Dating presented its own challenges. Many men seemed intimidated when they learned about my business success or my very public divorce from a prominent family. Others were attracted to what they perceived as my revenge story, wanting to hear salacious details about the Sterling's downfall. I learned quickly to identify which type I was dealing with. The intimidated ones usually revealed themselves by making jokes about successful women or suggesting I might want to slow down professionally. The thrill seekers wanted to know if I had more dirt on other wealthy families or if I could help them get back at their own ex-partners. Neither type was worth my time. Then I met David at a charity fundraiser for literacy programs, an event I attended as a donor, not because it was expected of me. He was a high school principal who had started a nonprofit providing books to underserved communities. When someone introduced us and mentioned my company name, his response was refreshingly different. Integrity marketing. That's an interesting combination of words. Most marketing feels like the opposite of integrity. We talked for hours about the challenge of maintaining authenticity in a world that often rewarded superficiality. He had never heard of the Sterling family scandal and wasn't particularly interested when I briefly mentioned my divorce. Instead, he wanted to know about my work helping companies rebuild trust with their communities. Our relationship developed slowly, built on genuine compatibility rather than drama or financial considerations. David had no interest in designer restaurants or exclusive events. He preferred hiking trails to country clubs, local coffee shops to high-end bars. With him, I rediscovered the parts of myself that had been suppressed during my marriage. My love of reading, my curiosity about different cultures, my enjoyment of simple pleasures. "You seem surprised when you laugh," he observed one evening as we watched a comedy show at a small theater in Capitol Hill. He was right. Somewhere during my marriage, I had forgotten that joy could be spontaneous and uncomplicated. Meanwhile, news of the Sterling family's continued struggles occasionally reached me through Seattle's business community. Henrik had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for tax evasion. Sterling Industries had been sold to a competitor, with most longtime employees losing their jobs. The family's charitable foundation had been dissolved, its remaining assets distributed to legitimate charities under court supervision. Zafira had reportedly moved to a modest apartment in Bellevue, living off what remained of her personal savings after legal fees and restitution payments. The woman who had once ruled Seattle's social scene now lived in relative obscurity. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. The vindication I had sought wasn't about seeing them suffer, but about reclaiming my own dignity and ensuring they faced consequences for their actions. Their continued struggles were the natural result of choices they had made long before I entered their lives. Cooper had apparently found some measure of peace in Portland. According to mutual acquaintances, he was working for a sustainable technology startup, living modestly, and had begun therapy to address his relationship patterns. He had reached out once more, about 6 months earlier, sending a brief email acknowledging his failures and wishing me well. I hadn't responded, but I hadn't deleted it either. It represented the closure I needed. his recognition that our problems hadn't been my fault. 2 years after my divorce, I stood in the conference room of my company's new offices in South Lake Union, looking out at Elliott Bay while preparing for a presentation to a potential client. The space was modern but warm, decorated with plants and artwork from local artists. Everything about it reflected the values Haley and I had built our business on: authenticity, transparency, and respect for others. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Good luck with the presentation today. Dinner at that little Thai place you love to celebrate afterward?" I smiled, appreciating how he remembered small details and never assumed his presence was required at my professional victories. He celebrated my successes without needing to be part of them, just as I supported his work without inserting myself into his school district politics. The client meeting went well. A family-owned restaurant chain wanted help rebuilding their reputation after food safety violations at several locations. Instead of hiding behind legal disclaimers and corporate speak, they were ready to take responsibility, implement real changes, and communicate honestly with their customers. "We made mistakes," the CEO admitted during our meeting. "We got too big too fast and lost sight of the standards my grandfather built this company on. We want to earn back trust the right way, even if it takes years." This was the kind of client we excelled with, people ready to do the hard work of genuine change rather than just managing perception. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how different my life had become. The woman who had once worried about Zafira's approval would hardly recognize the person I had become. I made decisions based on my own values now, not fear of someone else's judgment. I surrounded myself with people who valued authenticity over status, substance over appearance. My relationship with my family had also deepened. The distance that had grown during my marriage to Cooper had healed as I reconnected with who I truly was. My parents visited regularly, proud of the business I had built and the strength I had shown during difficult times. My brother often joked that his big sister had become scary competent, but it was said with admiration, not intimidation. "You're different," my mother observed during one visit. "More yourself, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense. For 5 years, I had been performing a version of myself that I thought would earn acceptance from people who were never going to accept me. Now I was free to be authentically me, flawed, ambitious, caring, and strong. The legal aftermath of the Sterling scandal had finally concluded. Henrik had served his sentence and was working as a consultant for small businesses, apparently having learned something about ethical practices during his time in prison. Cooper's cooperation with federal investigators had helped uncover similar schemes at other companies, leading to broader reforms in corporate oversight. I had testified as a witness in several related cases, helping prosecutors understand how families like the Sterlings used emotional manipulation and financial control to silence potential whistleblowers. It was difficult testimony to give, but necessary for preventing others from experiencing what I had endured. The legal settlement for my divorce had been invested wisely, providing security but not luxury. I lived comfortably but modestly, finding more satisfaction in building something meaningful than in accumulating status symbols. One evening, as David and I walked along the waterfront after dinner, he asked a question that made me pause. "Do you ever regret how everything happened? Not the divorce itself, but the way it played out so publicly?" I considered his question carefully. The public nature of my confrontation with the Sterling family had been necessary to protect myself and ensure accountability, but it had also made my personal pain a matter of public record. "No," I said finally. "The publicity was the only thing that prevented them from completely destroying me. If I had tried to handle it privately, they would have used their money and connections to paint me as an unstable gold digger. The public exposure forced them to face consequences they had been avoiding for years. And now, Now I have the life I always wanted but didn't know how to create. A career built on my own merit, relationships based on mutual respect, the freedom to make choices without fear of someone else's approval. As we walked, I thought about all the women who might be watching my story, trapped in their own toxic relationships, afraid to leave because of financial dependence or social pressure. The message I wanted them to hear wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming their power. Your story doesn't have to end the way someone else writes it. You have the ability to walk away from people who diminish you, even if they're family, even if they're wealthy, even if they seem untouchable. You can rebuild your life on your own terms. The key is preparation. Document everything. Build financial independence. Create a support network. Don't let anyone convince you that staying in a toxic situation is noble or necessary. Most importantly, don't let their version of events become your truth. You know what you experienced. Trust your instincts. Trust your worth. Today, my life is authentically mine. My success is built on my own merit and hard work. My relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The pain of those 5 years has faded, leaving behind wisdom and strength I might never have discovered otherwise. If you're in a relationship where your voice is silenced, where your worth is constantly questioned, where someone else controls the narrative of your life, know this: you have the power to write a new story. Your happy ending might not look like what you once imagined, but it can be beautiful, authentic, and truly yours. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, sharing our stories helps others find the courage to rewrite their own. Until next time, this is Alexa from Revenge Girls, reminding you that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well on your own terms.